after many career paths and thing, they were highly paid jobs. You know, they were really good jobs, really well paid for semi-skilled, you know, so unskilled, semi-skilled, and skilled labour. The jobs that replaced them weren't all that great. And what does this really mean to us in the IT operations division? So there was a study done by a couple of very bright guys from Cambridge called Thair and Osborne, and they did this great analysis of the likelihood of automation of a whole series of different job roles. And unfortunately, IT operations technicians came in with a 78% likelihood of being automated in the next 10 years. So, but that's okay because there's going to be more jobs created. It's all going to be fine. Actually, that's not true. There will be more jobs created, but unless you change your skills and unless you adapt and unless you move forward, you're not going to be the person who gets that job. I think the fact that you're here today is a great start because you're obviously part of that group that wants to move forward, wants to move their career forward. But it's, you know, it's a non-trivial thing. Just hang on just 1 second very quickly. My slideshow is not putting me in presenter view. It's still not putting me in presenter view. It's because I'm not in extend, that's why. Thank you. Okay, that's better. It is, sort of. For a given definition of, oh, really? Hey, finally got it the right way around. Super. Okay. So, you know, if you are working in IT operations, this is a serious and real problem. Okay? If you assume that the skills you have today are going to be the skills you need tomorrow, you know, you might be 40 years old, 15 years in industry, came out of uni, you know, started in industry 25 years. You are seriously looking at losing your job. How does that make everybody feel? Okay, you know, and I just don't want to sugarcoat this. You know, I really, really don't want to sugarcoat this. The role is going to adapt, the skills you're going to need to adapt, you know, what you're going to need to, in order to further your career is going to be, you're going to need to adapt. That's going to require you to do personal training. You're going to look at different skills, and I'm going to cover a lot of these different skills and stuff in the rest of the talk. You know, the way your your organization sponsors you into training and learning and future development is going to have to change. So thinking about the way we've managed these systems historically, the view of the ops guys was very much, you know, we kind of managed servers, and for servers just insert, you know, all of the infrastructure and physical hardware, and our whole focus was on infrastructure really. And what we're seeing now is obviously as we move to the cloud, which is offering us these SaaS and PaaS platforms, in a cloud native company, they're not really worried about the infrastructure. What they do is manage some kind of orchestration layer. And people have talked about Kubernetes, people have talked about Service Fabric, people have talked about DCOS. So our role is evolving, so we're moving more than one level of abstraction away. Now we've had earlier versions of that sort of abstraction with you know, System Center and Scorch and various sorts of tools like this, but now it's really moving to a level where we don't really care about an instance of a server anymore, or an instance of a virtual machine. This is the whole cattle not pets analogy that you've probably all heard about before. You know, if your pet is sick, you take it to the vet, you get it fixed. If your cattle is sick, you shoot it in the head and you move on. You know, this is the kind of model that we're moving towards, and the orchestration layer's job is to shoot the cattle in the head for you, you know, so you don't have to worry about that. And when I was talking about this to somebody, and I can't claim credit for this next slide, but they took this idea to the next level, and they said what's going to happen in the future is our role is we're going to have these orchestration layers, but our job is going to be to train the, sorry, I'm actually blocking the slide there. Our job is going to be to train the AI that manages the orchestration layer that manages the servers. So again, our role and the skills that we're going to have is moving up. We're getting further and further away. We're more and more abstracted. And you know, when I did a lot of research for the white paper, actually the future of, part of the white paper that's in the book I was waving around earlier about digital transformation, you know, broadly speaking, the best stats that I could come out with was there was about a 40-to-1 ratio. A Windows administrator would manage about 40 boxes at most. If you took most organizations, divided the number of servers they had and the number of administrators. In a traditional physical infrastructure world, it was about 40. Moving into a cloud and IaaS world and a virtualized world, you know, with VMware and consolidation that you had with VMware, that went up to about maybe about 400 per administrator in a really good, you know, virtualized environment, IaaS environment. The way most organizations run an IaaS cloud is pretty much the same as virtualization. If you were to move that up into a DevOps cloud native organization, they might be running about, the best figure I could come up with was about 2,500, you know, containers, instances, SaaS services, PaaS services, bringing all that together. I mean, a huge, you know, increase in the number of things that you would manage, but actually less cognitive load on you as the administrator because you have those orchestration layers, those monitoring layers, all that stuff is doing all that stuff for you. What that looks like, you know, once we have you're managing the AI that's managing the orchestration layer, that's managing the applications at this stage, the containers and the PaaS and SaaS, I've got no idea what that ratio might be. But, you know, all of this is building up this image that the worlds we're going to move into change, and our role needs to evolve if we're going to stay relevant. And the reason our role needs to evolve is if you take a fully loaded staff cost per hour for a 50K, you know, mid-career, early mid-career, you know, administrators getting paid 50K, you're about 40 pounds an hour. The smallest Azure IaaS instance is 0.013 pounds per hour. The largest Azure instance at the time I did this slide, I think there's some larger instances now, was about £7.45 an hour. So if you compare the most, you know, 32 core, 448 gig with a 6 terabyte hard drive is costing you £7.45 an hour, and you're costing £40 an hour. You can sort of start to see where, you know, where the people's attention of. If you work for an organization for whom cost is the most important thing in IT. And this comes back to some of the stuff that Jeffrey was talking about in his about those quadrants, that great, from Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, that great quadrant model is, if you're not moving up into that quadrant where you're delivering value and you're delivering innovation and you're really offering benefit to the organization, and your organizational mindset is stuck down there in it's about cost and I'm going to screw down cost and that's all I really care about, then the cost they're going to look at is you. So, you know, our challenge is to sort of evolve. So who's depressed right now? Good. Cool. It's not that bad, okay? And the reason it's not that bad is the size of the cloud market. So this first circle, DevOps and digital transformation market, you know, growing at an 18.7 compound annual growth rate over the next 5 years. This is the cloud managed services market, growing at a 16.6 compound annual growth rate. You know, grand total there, you add them together, it's a $460 billion industry, you know, by 2020. You know, the size of the market is growing enormously. The demand for people that have the right cloud skills, the right DevOps skills, the automation skills, who understand agile ways of working, you know, is literally going to more than double in size. So the good news is that there will be, if we go all the way back to Kathy Engelbert's thing, you know, there will be demand for these roles. You just need to make sure that you're not the person who's now working in a call center in the Welsh Valleys, you know, because you've actually been able to evolve your skill set and you don't get stuck in that cycle. And this is the challenge for me as an employer. You know, this is the challenge for you guys as team leaders. This is the challenge for the HR departments inside your organization is how do we put these training platforms together? So Mark, who actually introduced you, me and the thing, he came through our training academy, was an intern with us for a year, went back to uni, got a first, came back now, he's full-time working with us as an engineer. You know, we're trying to do that. We're looking to do more degree apprenticeships. We're looking to do, you know, put people through boot camps and training academies. But this is a really big challenge for organizations to understand how we're going to train these people up. And to be honest, you know, training for me is becoming, a lot of it is becoming more this sort of community of practice, coming along to meetups, coming along to user groups, you know, looking at MSD and Channel 9 and videos and online. I mean, who here uses Pluralsight, Udemy, what's the other one? The other big one? Yeah, Linda, the LinkedIn, it's now owned by LinkedIn. Yeah, so I mean, you know, there is more and more of a demand. So who gets to use those during their working day? Okay, who's stuck, you know, in their home office, not talking to their wife and children, you know, trying to do all that in their spare time? So I think, again, the challenge is going to have to be how do we move this forward so we carve out time in our day to say, right, as a team, we're all going to sit down and do this Pluralsight course or this Udemy course. And, you know, we have a management tool in our company called Objectives and Key Results, which is the way Google manages their cascade of work. So people put in their quarterly plans, I'm going to do this course, and we'll give them the time. We'll carve out the time. This is how the organizational structure and design needs to change. I was struck in this presentation, though, that the word them, you know, not us, because I'm the CEO of a multinational consulting firm. I don't need to change them; they have to change. Or maybe that's me being really bolshy and you know, fight the power people. But it just stuck out to me that she used the word them, the plebs. Right, plebgate. Right, so what does this system look like? And what does the future look like? So the first thing I want to start with is mindset. And this is just core DevOps 101. You know, if any of you, you know, went to our DevOps workshop yesterday, this is some of the stuff we cover in those kind of workshops. And the big message of the Phoenix project is this idea of systems thinking. Looking at the big picture, stop worrying about, you know, your micro-optimization and start to understand how you contribute to the entire value stream, the whole pipeline. So who here is into sort of, you know, doing cars and classic cars and stuff like that? Okay, so if you're old enough to remember what a carburetor is, you know, a carburetor is the part of the engine that's designed to balance the fuel and air ratio that goes into the engine. So most organizations, the way they design their organization is every one of you has to be 100% utilized and 100% output and doing that. So what happens to a car engine if the carburetor is working at 100%? The engine dies. Too much fuel, not enough air, the mix and ratio is wrong, black smoke, it all blows and it stalls and it dies. What's important with a carburetor or with a modern fuel injection system is to have the right amount of fuel, the right amount of air at the right time, and for it to be able to throttle up. Multiply that by every single part of the engine. What's important is that it does the right thing at the right time. So you might have somebody that spends a lot of their time doing nothing, but if they're available to do the right thing at the right time, it doesn't matter that they're only 50% utilized. That actually gives them 50% time to do improvement, to pay back technical debt, to work on the error budget, to do all the bug fixing. What's important is that they're there to do the right thing at the right time. So systems thinking is all about challenging you to look at the big picture, the end-to-end. Stop trying to optimize for every single person to be 100% utilized and start thinking about how does their contribution to the whole make the whole thing work better. That's systems thinking in a nutshell. So, you know, I don't know if you've seen the date on this. This is like 1957. This is a quote. This is from Wikipedia entry on systems engineering. A lot of this stuff is not new, but if you read this, you could literally be reading from the DevOps handbook. You know, it's the same kind of language we're trying to use. So, what does this big picture look like for us? Well, the big picture for us is starting to look at the CI/CD pipeline, not just being focused on the operate bit, down the end where historically we might have lived, we've got to start shifting left, as Sam said. We've got to understand more about how we're going to automate the release. We've got to understand that the release process, how the test automation works. We've got to understand the entire pipeline end to end, because then if we understand the entire pipeline end to end, again, you know, that 65,000 unit tests, or something that Sam was talking about in the VSTS presentation, we can have a lot of confidence at that end if we know that the pipeline. If we don't know the steps that happened prior, how can we have any confidence in this release package? NuGet package, RPM, container, doesn't matter what the package is, we've got to have confidence in that package. The only way we have confidence in the package is understanding all the steps that preceded it. So for a lot of us from an operations background, getting our head around a CI server works, getting our head around test-driven development, all these other kind of features, you know, we are got to go and start talking to the developers. We've got to start talking to the testers. We've got to be involved in their stand-ups. We'll come on to more stuff about multidisciplinary teams and stuff in a minute. Is this all making sense so far? Okay, great. The other thing is the challenge is as we start to reorganize our teams, you know, historically we've kind of thought I'm an exchange engineer, so you know, or I'm a DBA, I'm a SQL Server DBA, I'm an IIS platform guy, I'm a core OS guy, and you know, we organised our departments in these sort of horizontal bands. The correct thing is a horizontal band actually can't deliver any value end to end. Only a vertical slice through the organisation can actually deliver value. So if anybody's familiar with user stories in Agile, you know, if you're a developer, they will always be saying, take a vertical slice, deliver something that offers real value, a potentially shippable increment. And this kind of vertical slice thinking starts to come into operations as we move forward. And as a result of that, who's heard of the phrase T-shaped people? Okay, not that many. Okay, well, that surprises me actually. So a T-shaped person is decided somebody who has a very broad overview of everything. So if we go back to that presentation, the pipeline image, you've got a fairly good awareness of every step on that thing. You've got a broad knowledge, but you have a deep specialization in something. And I still firmly believe that whilst there is a role for a generalist in the team, having deep specialization is really important. For me personally, you know, going back to in the late 90s, early 2000s, I had a really deep specialization in IIS. Like I knew IIS back to front. I knew how to debug IIS. You know, I found a security vulnerability in the SSL handling in IIS. You know, I knew it really, really well. And I genuinely believe that that changed something in my brain. You know, knowing something to that level of detail is super important. So you've got to find that thing or whatever it is that's passionate about, be really deep at it. But not at the expense of having that broad awareness and going to a different user group or talking to a different bunch of people. Super important to be broad and deep. There's an asterisk next to the I-shaped person. An I-shaped person is somebody who's just a pure down and out technical specialist. You know that one thing and know it brilliantly. There's still a role for those kind of people in the organization where you have really super nerdy, technical, deep skills. The number of T-shaped people you need compared to the number of I-shaped people is going to be 100 to 1. So you need to have a serious conversation about, I would be a T-shaped person if I was you. Who's heard the term full stack developer? Who hates the term full stack developer? Who think anybody who calls themselves a full stack developer is a complete tool? Yeah. And the reason I think that is this, because I killed myself laughing when I saw this, because really this is the story of a full stack developer. You know, I read it somewhere in the manual, now I'm a full stack dev. Adam Smith, in a famous book they call The Wealth of Nations over 100 years ago, talked about the importance of specialization. Specialization is really, really important because a specialist can do things. You cannot be a really good developer and a really good Windows administrator and a really good test automation person and a really good, you know, Scrum coach and Agile manager and a really good, you know how to reconfigure the SAN and you know how to reconfigure the firewall and you need to do this, that and the other. It's not possible. It's literally not possible. So, you know, maintain the broad awareness, have a deep speciality, never call yourself a full stack dev. That said, as we move forward, I mean, who here still predominantly uses the GUI on a day-to-day basis? Awesome. You're all lying. You're all a bunch of lying bastards. How many, you know, so in reality, I think we've moved to PowerShell. You know, broadly speaking, most of us are using, you know, we're using PowerShell like we were using batch files 10 years ago, or command files, or systems internals, God bless them. You know, so, you know, the challenge now is that we're starting to see actually you're programming against APIs. So you're using either domain-specific languages like you know, Zeruzos managed templates, or you know, any of the other configuration management tools, but you're also increasingly having to program directly against REST APIs. So you are genuinely starting to become a, you know, not to become a developer, or you can call it an infrastructure developer if you like, but you need to understand development skills. So we're moving away from the GUI. We're starting to program against APIs. We've got to understand how APIs work. We've got to understand how the software development model works. And you know, most importantly, the cloud is just described as, you know, you're running on somebody else's hardware, but it's somebody else's hardware. I mean, if you have a core specialization in SANs, core networks, racking and stacking, unless you are going to be working for Amazon, Azure, somebody else, you physically just won't be touching the hardware anymore. I mean, going forward, a lot of the people like Mark, for example, I don't know, have you ever installed Linux from scratch on a box? Yeah, once or twice. Going forward, in 5 years' time, you will have an entire generation of systems administrators who have never installed an OS from scratch. Why would they? There is a pre-installed image that's up to date that has a core OS, and I just take that core OS and build it. You're not going to be fiddling with the hardware. I'm not going to be pulling little interrupts off a board. I'm not going to be setting dip switches, all those kind of things that I grew up doing. You just won't do it, and there's no need to. Even in the Azure Stack world that Jeffrey was talking about, you still don't get to touch the hardware. Hardware is the responsibility of the vendor. The vendor will come in with a pallet and a shipping trolley, and they'll have a power cable and a network cable, and they'll plug it in. You know, for your point, and they'll have a support contract, and if the hardware breaks, their support contract engineer will come out and fix it. So you will be completely abstracted from the hardware, even in a hybrid cloud platform world. That's the future. If you're focusing on the hardware, I'd rapidly suggest you start focusing on the software. So what does the future look like about changing the way that we work? So I just need to keep track of time. You keep, okay. What's the future, I'm whizzing through this actually. What's the future of the way that we work like? So who here still works in predominantly an ITIL-aligned shop? Yeah, that's my background in, you know, large enterprise organizations. I have, for my sins, implemented ITIL in large enterprise organizations. And I love ITIL. If you're a cloud native startup in Silicon Valley or whatever, if you can genuinely tell me there's something on that circle that you shouldn't be doing in order to deliver good, reliable operations at scale, I would be amazed. I think most of the stuff in there is really good advice. You need to, certainly you definitely need to do event management. You need to understand the difference between incident management, getting it fixed, and problem management, actually getting to the root cause. You know, just killing a Docker instance and respawning it is not problem management if it keeps, you know, happening again and again and again. Eventually you've got to understand the root cause and you've got to fix it. The problem with ITIL is that all of these things here are roles and functions that need to be delivered. Unfortunately, it was all interpreted as job descriptions. So you ended up with a supplier manager, a service level manager, a service catalog manager, an availability manager, a, you know, release manager, and blah, 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 blah. So it became very, very onerous. And the end state became about complying to the model rather than actually delivering a really good, reliable service. As we move forward, the way we do these things, the way we do incident management will completely change. I'm not going to, you know, some of the incident management will be automated by the orchestration layer. I can resolve the incident automatically. Our focus shifts much more to problem management. event management and collecting all the data. I won't be RDPing onto a box or SSHing into a box. I'm going to be going into OMS and log analytics and app insights and app dynamics and New Relic and all these sort of tools. So the way we do some of this is going to change. The way we do things pretty much all the way around this circle is going to change. So Microsoft have actually made a first stab at sort of outlining what they think this future looks like. That's what they're referring to as modern service management. And there is a presentation this afternoon from Kathleen Wilson, who is actually going to be dialing in by video from Toronto to give her presentation on modern service management. I'm going to leave it there until I actually sit down and listen to Kathleen's presentation, until I form an opinion on modern service management. I think it's a really good start. I think that these frameworks need to evolve. I think there's some good stuff in here. I'm probably not quite convinced that it goes far enough yet. So, but I think it's a good place to start, and it's good to see that the ITIL community is seeing that they need to evolve. I've got 5 minutes left. Shit. Right, I'm really going to have to go quick. Right, okay. Cloud adoption framework. This is the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, which basically is their first step on if you're going to move to the cloud, all of the things you need to talk about. Again, covers a lot of many similar things. What I do like is you've got people, business, governance, some of this stuff which is not in ITIL, it's completely focused on the infrastructure. It's broadening out. This is the ITIL stuff and the cloudy stuff that we do. This is bringing in, actually, if I'm going to move to the thing, I've got to think about my business performance. I've got to worry about my product portfolio. I've really got to look at all of this training and career management and how we change incentives, which I think is great. Because as we move forward with these roles, we are going to be moving from being organized by roles. Somebody has an idea, they back a truck of ideas up, dump them all on you onto the demand planning guys. It goes into the PMO, some BA messes about with it, some guy in his ivory tower in the technical architect comes along. Then there's this massive backlog with development. Then the DBA does some stuff by hand. Then QA in another backlog. And then the big boss flies in with his helicopter and drops a few more requirements and screws the whole thing up. And then you're going to go back to the start. And then the poor guy here is trying to design the service. And there's operations. And then you have a really unhappy customer. So unsurprisingly, so what we're trying to do, optimize for flow. Let's have a smaller bunch of ideas. Let's have a really good product owner who's able to prioritize this stuff. Let's pull even a smaller bunch of ideas into the sprint backlog. Let's have a multidisciplinary team who don't just deliver it, but they own it. They live site incidents, all the stuff that Sam was talking about, doing the LSIs, and hopefully that leads us to a happy customer. So, it's all about reducing handovers, removing queues, lower batch size, improving cycle time. So that leads us on to this idea of these multidisciplinary teams. So most of the organizations we deal with are trying to move to some variant of this multidisciplinary team model. This is the vertical slice. What you define as a product in your organization might be different. ASOS, for example, have a vertical slice through their entire e-commerce application is search and navigation. They have a product team that does search and navigation. They have a product team that focuses on checkout. They have a product team that focuses on indexing. That's the way they've decided to think. Other organizations might focus their product team against actual shippable products that represent to the customer. Completely up to you, how you do within the time we have available. Right. Most of us was mentioned actually in the presentation about Kanban boards. Actually, I've got 10 minutes. I've got 2:15. You're lying.
5 minutes for questions.
Okay. All right. So the idea of a Kanban model is pretty easy to do. We've got some stuff to do, stuff that's actually really ready. I'm going to pull a ticket over here to my ready right now. I'll go back. The value of having a physical Kanban board is when somebody comes to you and says, "What are you doing?" I'm going, "Well, look at the fucking ticket." It shows pretty clearly. Most people have a little smiley, picture of their head on the ticket. You want to know what I'm doing? Just go and look at the dashboard. If I'm not interrupted by a project manager saying, "What are you doing?" Yeah. And when will it be done? Well, it'll be done when it's done. I'm going to work on this ticket and this ticket only, single piece flow, focused on it. I'm going to do that thing, and when it's done, it'll done. The thing will take as long as it needs to take. Do you know what I mean? I can't do anything any faster. If I need help and I'm stuck, this is where my multidisciplinary team comes together, and I say in my morning stand-up, guys, I'm stuck. Right, how do we help? I've got some bandwidth. You know, I'm empty of work. I'm going to come and help you. Because the most important thing is to get this thing done before I take this thing from the backlog and move it over. So if there's somebody in your team that says, I've just finished my piece of work, I've moved it over to my done category, they should be helping you get this one moved if you're stuck before they do that. We care about getting stuff done, which is important to have a good definition of done. The columns that you might have in your Kanban board, you know, might vary. Completely depends upon your organization, your workflow, your value stream. What's the process that you have in your company to take something from production and ship it? 27 to 49 in 5 minutes. Right, okay, I can do it. It's about being agile. I love this guy, you know. But moving to an agile and DevOps-enabled world is not easy. You know, we've got to change the way we manage. We've got to change our attitude to change. We're going to move to collaborative things. Batch sizes, architecture. Sam made a really good point about loosely coupled. You know, it's all about being loosely coupled. It's going to be a lot more open source, and we're going to animate animated GIFs on my brain. We're going to automate the heck out of it. But as I was saying, moving to an agile and flexible way of working is really, really, really hard. So there will be failure. And, you know, your attitude towards failure, I'm just going to stop that, because actually, no, I'm going to go back. The attitude towards failure is really, really, really important. So what does the future look like? The biggest shift we have to do is we have to start focusing on outcomes. So Barry O'Reilly, who is one of the co-authors of the Lean Enterprise book, went to a product management conference. Again, I'm trying to be broad. I'm trying to think outside of my technical focus. I went to the project management thing. So this is stuff that he does at the CEO, CIO, the C-suite level in the organizations to get them to, he's actually teaching, you know, the heads of large Fortune 500 companies to basically look at, this is pretty much a user story format, you know, as AI want, blah, 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 you know. Trying to get them to move towards, let's be focused on the outcome. Then you can break this down into saying, this is the outcome I want. You know, I believe that these are the things that are going to change when I get this outcome. You know, I believe that changing these things and make these things better is going to actually drive that. And I'm going to measure that by these things. And I'm going to check. We're going to be driven by outcomes. This is the DORA model from the DevOps Research Association, Nicole Forsgren and Jez and Jean. And historically in IT, we've really focused way down here on these process metrics. You know, is the server up? Do you think your customers really care whether the server's up? They care whether the application is functioning correctly. They don't care whether the server's up. That's a process metric. But we never went any further. You know, we started to move into some capability metrics. How quickly can I provision a server? You know, that's a capability metric. That's telling you something about the capability your organization has. Most of us never got as far as customer satisfaction metrics and really understanding, at best these days, maybe net promoter score or something like that. One of the things that Microsoft has done a lot of is net promoter score, telemetry, really understanding what's happening inside the thing. Really, really good. Right, I've got 2 minutes. Customer needs. Okay, some examples. These are the metrics from the Puppet State of DevOps report, the 4 metrics that they believe contribute the most to thing. I mean, measuring cycle time, you know, super important, lead time and process time. You know, it matters how long you spend doing the thing, but it also matters even more how long it was stuck in the queue, not actually moving forward. He's familiar with Goodhart's law. most times the organization, like, you know, I got my bonus every year because I'm pretty sure I could make the availability metric that was in my KPI appear right, even if we'd had an outage, because you could game the metrics. Oh, we excluded that. That was a scheduled change. That was an outage, you know. We put a change window in. So I put a 12-hour change window in for something I thought was only going to take 5 minutes, and then it broke, and then I'm going to do the thing. But it was all okay because it didn't count towards the KPI because it was inside a change window. So, you know, my corollary to this is if that measurement, that thing you're measuring doesn't give you feedback to improve, then almost like what's the point of measuring it? Look at every single thing you measure and say, how I can use this metric to make things better, to change things and make things better. Right, what does the future look like for a Windows operations person? I've got 10 slides left. I'm sure I can do it. What does the future of Windows administration looks like? Looks like that. So yeah, so everything that we are seeing, you know, in the Windows world, you know, we've got a Windows server that doesn't have a GUI. So what is it? It's just server. So server core doesn't have a GUI. Thanks to Jeffrey, we've got this great command language, you know, API that helps us administer. It's been extended into Windows PowerShell. So really, we're moving to a world that Linux administrators have been in for a long while. You know, SSHing in, running scripts, or fully, you know, using this sort of headless model. You know, the future is very much things. So for those of you who actually should have been in Steve Murawski's talk instead of coming to mine, you know, in the DSC book, Steve talks about, you know, the administration will essentially become the intelligent editing of text files. Now, I think it's a little bit more than that. You know, actually, you're going to be doing lots of calls against an API. It's not just going to be, you know, having a big /etc, you know, directory on a Linux server with all these ini files and this sort of stuff in it. But more and more stuff, you know, will be managed by DSLs like PowerShell DSC. You know, you're going to be running these through CI/CD pipelines. You know, is going to look a lot more like Linux administration than the traditional Windows administrator role. Package management, chocolatey. Again, another concept which has been around in Linux engineering of a good package and having a good package manager for a long time. If you not familiar with chocolatey or the Microsoft equivalent, is it cool? One store? Yep, one get. You know, again, package management is definitely the future. Understanding NuGet is really core part. Orchestration, we talked about this, Kubernetes, DCOS, Service Fabric. We're going to have these orchestration layers. They're going to be putting a layer of abstraction between us and the services that we manage. You know, these things will make it easy to spin things up, but they'll also say, right, I want 5 of X. If 1 of X dies, I'll just bring 1 up. You know, why do I really care if I'm running a load-balanced web farm where it's all running an identical set of packages, it's all configuration managed, it's all under control? If 1 of those dies, just spin up another one. Yeah, I mean, my business partner, James, wrote the ordering platform for Pizza Hut, you know, so they would do like 20,000 pizza orders between like 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock on a Friday night. I can start to get my orchestration layer to manage that for me. You know, Monday to Thursday, I run 10 servers. Between 6 and 8 on Friday, I run 100 servers, and then, you know, I spin it down. You know, as these things and this AI layer that we were talking about before starts to come in, you know, all of this stuff, a lot of the capacity planning and stuff that we spend all our time worrying about will start to be managed by these layers. Cloud and hybrid, you know, there is no doubt that this is a cloud and hybrid world. Azure, AWS, GCE, Oracle Cloud if you can't get away from the licensing model. You know, Amazon have signed a deal with VMware to have a sort of a VMware cloud. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that. GCE signed a deal with Nutanix with their hyperconverged infrastructure to enable you to have like a GCE type like instances for running containers and other stuff on premise. Everybody is trying to counter the risk of Azure Stack. In summary, you know, the world is changing and it's going to impact us. You know, you can't stick your head in the ground and think that it's not. We'll have to change how we think, we'll have to change how we work, we'll have to change how we measure success. You know, we'll have to change the tooling that we use, and we need to get restarted on training now. Great quote from Alan Kay. You know, you guys are here today because you want to invent the future. You want to take control of your companies, your organizations, your teams, your own careers, and move forward. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. Thank you very much. Any questions, or do you want?
We've got a minute for questions before you all go to lunch. So, yeah, any questions?
Any questions? You want to be first in the lunch queue, don't you? You know where I am.
Can we be first in the lunch queue?
You can be first in the lunch queue. Guys, wait, before you go, can I ask you to go through the gap there and join that lunch queue that's on that back wall on the opposite side of the toilets? That way the people who are coming down the stairs from upstairs can get into this queue here. So go straight through the gap, join onto that queue. Thank you.
What was the book you mentioned at the beginning, the digital transformation book? What book was that?
Oh, it's a white paper that we've got, so if you want to have a read of that.
Yeah.